Hey everyone, and welcome to the College Chaps podcast. On this episode, we're going to talk with our guest about his brand new book, and inevitably, we'll end up talking about hot dogs. But first, we are the Chaps, and when this guest visits, we always get a full turnout. So, fresh from downing a pint of Guinness in front of 300 Irish football fans at the weekend, Ollie is with us, and for the second successive weeks, our resident national champion Alex is with us. How are you both?
Yeah, I'm doing really well, thank you. There's no need for me to neck a pint of Guinness on this podcast recording, which is music to my ears, because that was an experience that A, I wasn't expecting, and B, I don't ever want to have to repeat again.
I'm
To
guessing
be honest,
there was some pressure involved with that with the
there's
audience.
a lot of pressure, involved, and I could feel the disdain of the crowd when I didn't manage to get the whole pint of Guinness down in one go, having been up for I'd already been up for 28 hours at the time. So yeah, it was all good. It was all good fun.
Alex, you're an athlete. You don't drink Guinness like that, do you?
I love a pint of Guinness, so I would have finished it in one had I been there for Ollie to tag me in.
No,
Uh,
there's
Couldn't
a
use
throwdown
you.
of the gauntlet.
Couldn't use you.
Our guest is no stranger to this show, although we typically speak to him around Thanksgiving or Christmas time when food is very much in our minds. But this is August, meaning there's a very special reason for our chat. He releases his memoirs, House of Smoke, on September 16th. And if that isn't exciting enough, season 8 of True South airs 1 week from today. So I'm not going to talk any more apart from saying it's awesome to welcome back Mr. John T. Edge. John T., hi, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. I'm glad to be back with y'all. Y'all are a pleasure. You really are.
That's very kind of you to say. You always get something nice to say about us. Not every guest has something nice to say about us.
You may
Um,
disprove me over the next 30 minutes. You may
well,
give me
we'll try.
reasons to curse you. It's possible.
I think we'll try our best. So, as I said in the intro, you've got some very special work coming out. It comes out on September 16th, I think, here as well as in the US. It's about you, John T. It's not about food as such, right? You've written about food
Right.
for most of your life. It's about you growing up. It's about how you've gone through your life. You were very kind to send us a copy of the book. I feel somewhat privileged to have read about it, but it is it's a real insight into not just how you grew up, but life in the South. Tell us how,
Pros.
not so much how the book came about, but really the why was this the right time to share your memoirs with everybody?
Um, I'd been doing this work in the background all the while. Like if you watch True South, in our third season, we made an episode about my reconciliation with my mother by way of her catfish stew and the funeral we had for my mother on camera. So, in a lot of ways, this book is a product of the thinking I got to do as I drove the South for True South. And it really came into focus for me when we made that episode in Bowman, South Carolina. Um, you know, we did it with Wright was set up in kind of like this interrogation theater. He's set up behind this black scrim. I couldn't really see him. There were cameras surrounding me, and he asked me questions like, how did your mother damage you? I think the exact question was, in what ways did your mother damage you? Um, and that experience making that show, and it made me realize I had a lot to figure out um, about my relationship to my parents, about my relationship to the South and the very specific part of the South where I grew up. Um, and, you know, I came out of that process. I come out of that process now with a book about to come out with a deeper love for my place and my people than when I began. And I didn't predicate that, but that's where I got. So even though this book is tough, This book arcs toward love and acceptance, and that's kind of the work we all strive for, you know?
And a lot of that journey, John T, starts and ultimately ends with your family home in Clinton, which features very heavily in the book. The history of it is fascinating. Um, your battle to reconcile yourself with the relationship with your mother and everything is right there from the very start of that book, and then obviously at the end wraps up with your um the feelings about the family home and some recollections of that place. Now, as you look back, as the book's about to publish, and you've been through that journey with yourself and that place, how do you feel about the property in Clinton now?
It's no longer my house. You know, if you go back to Clinton, Georgia, where I grew up, there's still a kind of marker at the center of the town that still says Iverson Edge House. And I think that's because Iverson's the most famous person who ever lived there. And our family, perhaps maybe it's because we lived there the longest period. We lived there 23 years. So maybe that's why. But my name is still associated with that place. And my stories are bound up in that place, in that house that was, the same place where a Confederate brigadier general took his first breath. Um, the thing I realize quite clearly now is though that was my home growing up, my home now, the home where I choose to live is Oxford, Mississippi. Going back to Clinton gave me an opportunity to face down um, a lot of the tough things I faced in my childhood. It also reminded me of the great friends I had from Little League Baseball and Midget League Football growing up in Clinton. So it's all in there, man.
You speak a little bit there about Oxford and that being the place you now call home.
Yeah,
We hear a lot, and you've spoken to us a lot about Oxford, Mississippi. You know, the charm of that town or that place. You compare that to where you grew up. It must be quite a different environment. And for us as Brits coming out, you hear a lot about the South, right? And
right.
you almost picture it as one place. And we're lucky, and I've traveled it. George has traveled it way more extensively than I have. But yeah, those two places are 6.5, 7 hours apart if you're driving. This is
Yeah.
a big, big stretch of land and probably quite different, right?
Yeah. I mean, think about it, Alex. The American South is comparable in size to Western Europe. So, that 6.5, 7 hour drive, a lot changes. The place I grew up was really the country. I grew up on 7 acres of land on the edge of the town of Clinton that was really no longer a town. In the 1820s, it was boom town. It was on the edge of the cotton growing area of the American South. It was, as Americans pushed west, Clinton was at one point on the leading edge of that. But by the time I grew up, Clinton, the old courthouse had been torn down at the center of town. The street map was really hard to discern, like, what was here and what was there. Clinton had more of a past than a future. In the town I live now, Oxford is dynamic and growing. And, if you live in Oxford, you sit around and sometimes you curse about how much it's growing. Housing prices are skyrocketing. A house, everybody on our streets talking about a house around the corner that just sold for 2 million. Somebody else said, no, I heard it was 3. Like, it's crazy train. But also that's a reflection of the dynamism of Oxford. It's a beautiful place, the center of a great university with a really amazing creative community, and people want to live there. I feel real lucky to live there. I grew up in a small town, Alex, to your question, thinking I wanted to quit a small town, but I found a different kind of small town in Oxford.
One of the chapters, or a couple of the chapters that jump out in the book, John T, is about your time when you went to college, because you're effectively moving away from home and getting into the college experience, and you go to the University of Georgia at Athens. And I think Alex may disagree with me here, but the college experience in America always feels very different to the college experience in the UK, and you hear TV and film about people making the most of the full college experience, which you clearly did, and you make reference to Animal House in the book, right? Now, when you read the book, I've said that in slightly jovial fashion, but you talk about how the kind of damage that can do to an individual. When you look back on your time in Athens, certainly the first time, how do you feel about that? And what would your advice be to, younger people who are going to college for the first time now?
I mean, I was raised to believe that college would be mind expanding for me, that this small town in which I live, that the horizons would broaden for me, that college would be a place of experimentation, that college would be a place to sow my wild oats. And I only heard the wild oats part, really. I was an unfocused student who drank and danced at a time when it was a really good, really good moment to drink and dance and listen to music. I showed up in Athens in 1980, the same year that REM formed, the same year that REM plays, its first show down the road from my old fraternity house. So for me, Athens promised that experimentation. I ended up in a fraternity system and there was a lot of conformity in that. So I tried to bust out of that. Um, but what I took away, and eventually I flunk out. I mean, y'all have read the book, I flunk out of college. Um, the thing I took away from that I think is instructive is this, and I say this often. I now teach back at the University of Georgia, the same place I flunked out of, and I take great pride in that because it shows the possibility for all of us that your failure does not limit your next try. Life is about failure, and just as writing is all failure till you finally get something that's decent on the page. Y'all know this. Um, and I've realized as I look back on my time in Athens that, yes, I failed out of school, but a lot of the things I was trying in Athens are kind of germs of the things that I end up doing later in my life. I find the stage in a way. I become a leader in my fraternity. Um, I fall in love with music and what music tells me. There's a lot of college still in me.
You touched on REM then, and I was aware of REM and Athens and your exposure to that from watching True South, but it wasn't really until I read the book that I really understood how big a part of Athens and the music scene and everything that came from there that Athens was. What was it? What was it like being a part of that? And I guess, do you look back at that as being a historical change in American musical culture?
Yeah, I'll speak to the latter part first, Oliver. The idea that this was, an historical moment for the nation, really, Athens in the 1980s was. There's a great book I could recommend to y'all if it's in the bookshelf portion of my book of House of Smoke at the back called Cool Town. And it's by an historian named Grace Hale, who was in Athens at about the same time as me. She was more embedded in the music scene than I was, but it's really about a college town where people were experimenting with identity. I mean, that's really what college can be at its best. You figure out who you are, you figure out who your tribe is, you try these various things until something feels right, something feels good, until you find yourself becoming somewhat successful at that thing you're trying. And Athens was a place of wild experimentation for many people. I had a great friend, Sam McNair, who was in the band Art in the Dark. I'm still great friends with Sam, was texting with him today. Sam, began playing keyboards in the band Art in the Dark. He taught himself to play keyboards as he was beginning the band. Like people tried things. And that's what I admire so much about that moment. There were people who were trying new sounds. There were people trying to think about new ways to be in the world. This is not, the civil rights movement is not that far away. This is 1980. Civil rights, the Voting Rights Act was passed 15 years before. A pall was still hanging over the South. And in Athens, it felt like people were kind of trying to um, dance so hard and make such good music that they kind of, I don't know, they're kind of almost like they were creating a newer South in the moment that was not necessarily based in politics, but based in joy and based in a recognition that the old ways wouldn't work for that generation.
An interesting one though, isn't it? Because you think back to when, I guess, kind of musical generations, I'm struggling with the right words here, not necessarily formed, like, California in the 60s or London in the 70s. I grew
Right.
up in Glasgow in the 80s, which had a very vibrant music scene at that point. And, people, as we've just asked you, will say, well, what was it like? You don't realize at that moment in time of what's
No.
happening. You just know that there's a lot of good music happening, or, fashion or whatever it might be. But then I guess, how do you look back on that time in Athens, John T, when you look back with the benefit of retrospect, what was it like to be at that time?
I mean, I mentioned this earlier. I was a frat boy. And I was a confused frat boy. Like I was booking bands like the Flat Duo Jets, led by Dexter Romweber, who just died not long ago, that was singing like Eddie Cochran style rockabilly, fierce, fierce stuff. I booked the Flat Duo Jets one time for $50 and a handle of gin. Um, you know, and so it felt like a scene that you could be a part of. Like I was a frat boy on the outside of that scene, and yet I could step into that scene and book a band like that. Um, you know, Musicians would busk on the sidewalk, not singing like James Taylor or something, but singing original music on the sidewalk. Um, this band I write about in the book, the Barbecue Killers. Had a huge crush on Laura Carter, the lead singer for the Barbecue Killers, and she was cute as a button. She was also wild. I remember she came on stage one time with like tampons stuck in her ears. Like you know, people were creating spectacles as way of saying, like, you see that previous generation, that's not me. I'm testing the limits for a newer generation. And to be even on the periphery of that, like I I remember like this beautiful woman clogging to punk rock music on stage one night as I watched her. It's like, and those two things, like clogging from some Southern past and punk rock pushing it the frontiers of the future. Like that tension was there. You could see people trying to wrest control of their region and make a change, kind of any kind of change. Like, let's just poke at it. That's what it felt like to be in Athens.
For those of us who've known you for a longer period, we know about your relationship with the Southern Food Alliance, and that's where I think a lot of us, found you with your writings. I was telling the guys when we were kind of looking through the questions, I found the chapter about really your kind of the end of your time at the Southern Food Alliance was one of the more difficult chapters to read, because it's clear over that period you invested so much of your time. Then for someone who's on the outside looking in, you seem to be so harshly treated to the point that you exit the organization. How do you how do you feel now? Because you've been away for a few years. How do you feel, not necessarily about that chapter, but about some of the people that you worked with so closely, who then kind of forced you out?
Yeah. So I directed the Southern Foodways Alliance from 1999 to 2021. And, I'm really proud of the work we did. I mean, and the work my colleagues there continue to do. I mean, a journal, a podcast, 100 plus films, 1,000 plus oral histories. Like it's remarkable work that documents Southern food culture. Um, and in 2020, I got challenged by a number of folks who said that the stories that I helped tell were not mine to tell. Um, and in that moment, that hurt. It's interesting now to step back from that. And I write about that in the book in detail. I tried to report that out, George, like instead of being emotional about it, like I reported it out. Like I went to sources. I didn't rely upon my memory. I went to written documents and videotapes and the like, trying to figure out actually what happened. And what I come away from that is that, I had more power in that very small world, the Southern food world, than I even suspected. And people challenge that power, some for reasons of morals, saying that, as a white man leading an organization that documented the stories of women and people of color, that perhaps my voice shouldn't be the largest one in the room. And I accept those critiques. Those are worthwhile things for me to think about. And in the book, I come to peace with that. I also recognize that because I possessed more power than I knew I really did, that some people wanted that power, or didn't want me to have that power. And that's what some of that was about too. The 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 news for me though is that, that prompt in 2020 got me to think about what I really wanted to do. You know, the thing I love about True South is that show is it's not really about food, and it's certainly not about sports. It's about identity and how people are expressing themselves and making a way and feeding their families in the modern South. In that moment in 2020, I got to step back and realize that the work I want to do in the South is not restricted to food. It's bigger than that. So I got to redirect. I got to start again in the same way I got to start again after I flunked out of college. In the same way I got to start again when I moved from Atlanta to Oxford in 1995. I've started over 3 times in my life. I recommend it heartily to folks. Every time I took a big chance, um, it was difficult at first, but on the other side of taking that big chance, I found more happiness in my life.
That's
So I recommend big chances.
that's some very poignant advice. I love the idea of taking chances and starting afresh and starting anew and taking a new path and totally going all in with it. You mentioned True South, and we can't have you on and not talk about the new season of True South. It starts in your hometown
It does.
of Clinton, Georgia. Start us there. Tell us a little bit about what we can expect. I mean, we're going to sit and watch it anyway. All three of us are going to sit and watch every episode, but maybe we're not going to give away too much on here so that the people listening have to actually go and watch it. But what can we expect from season 8?
So season 8 really is about the making of this book, House of Smoke. Um, it's about my return, my serial return to Clinton, Georgia, where I grew up, back to that house where the Confederate Brigadier General took his first breath, back to that house that had an historical marker out front that told everyone he was a hero of the Civil War. I come back again and again and again to that small town where I grew up to see friends, to reunite with people I left behind when I left Clinton behind. Those little league friends, those midget league football friends, the people I went to kindergarten with and grammar school with. Like I get to see them all on this path I mean, it's almost like I've come back to kill off that general in a bunch of different ways. Because as a boy, my family adopted that general almost like he was a member of our family. And as I looked at my life, it's like, I don't want that general in my life. I don't want that Confederate. I don't want that Confederate general on my quasi family tree. So in some ways, I went back to Clinton to kill off the general. But in a lot of other ways, I came back to reckon with the place that made me and realize how much of that place still lives in me, how much of that place I love. We go back to some of the restaurants my father took me to. My mother was always a spectacle. My father was quieter, and in many ways, this show is about the places my father took me. So we go to New Way Wieners. Yes, hot dogs, George, always hot dogs. We go to New Way Wieners, my favorite chili slaw dog, the one I grew up on. We go to New Way, and then we also go to Fresh Air Barbecue, which is, I describe it in the show as kind of the mother church of Georgia barbecue, around since 1929. My father used to take me there as a boy. But those are places where I can step into that fresh air, and the smell from the grill, the onions hits my nostrils, and I'm ate again. I can walk in fresh air, and I step into that sawdust that covers the floor. I smell the smoke that's spiraling out of that stack, and I'm 10, and I'm on the road with my father, and there's fresh air in front of us. It's a return.
John T, you talked about reinventing yourself there, and 3 different major reinventions of yourself in your lifetime, and True South is one of those. You're now
Yep.
sat here with 3 guys from the UK talking about this TV program that you just started making. 8 seasons. This will be the 8th season. Did you ever imagine when you guys set out and made that first episode and series of True South, the success, the international acclaim that it would receive?
Yeah, you were not my target audience, Oliver. Yeah.
I take that hurts really deeply. I'll be honest with you.
I to be honest, even making one season was just like beyond my reckoning that we could get to do that. And then we made the one season, and people responded to it. It was weird enough, and when I was young, my mother, I write about this in the book, my mother put a Henry David Thoreau poster on my wall that said, to step to the beat of your own drummer, however measured or far away. And True South has always felt like we did this singular thing. And it doesn't fit as a sports program. It doesn't fit as a food program. It's singular, and it comes from the squirrely brains of Wright Thompson and Tim Horgan and myself, and all the crew who work with us, who are so dedicated to the show. But I think that's the formula. That's the secret. If we do have a formula, it's like, follow the story that you think is important. Go with your passions. Go, don't write to a market. Try to talk to people. And that's what True South is. This first episode focuses on me and my story, and I hope it offers kind of a universal for people who want to think about the place they're from, if they have a complicated relationship to it, the people they're from, if they have a complicated relationship with their family. But then the rest of the season does the things we always do. Like we go to Ocean Springs, Mississippi, and we go to Charleston, South Carolina, and Jacksonville, Florida. And we meet, for the most part, working class cooks and working class eaters, and we talk to them about their aspirations. We talk to them about their fears. We talk to them about life in the South.
It's such a great show, and I mean I'm a sucker for these types of shows, right? I love food shows. I love shows that shine a light on places that aren't particularly well known, where you get to meet people and explore their stories. The one thing I want to ask you is, what's that one crazy story from all of these 8 seasons of filming True South? The one crazy story that sticks out to you?
I I can remember in our very first season, I think I've talked to y'all about him before because when people ask me the most memorable character, the most memorable moments, it all goes back to Lucky Palace in Shreveport, Louisiana, actually in Bossier City, just across from Shreveport, with Quan Lim, the proprietor, who by the time I met him had already was already limping through the dining room. Cancer had already eaten at his leg. Um, he had a snaggletooth grin and this deep and abiding love of wine. He was an enophile and a great collector, but he loved to commune people at the table. And for me, the moment was we were filming there in Lucky Palace. And it was kind of what's that word they say? Shit show. It was kind of a shit show. Um, like we were hard to deal with. We were ordering everything on the table. The table was like 12, 14, 16 people who were friends with Lim crowded in with the crew. And I didn't realize how you made TV at this point. And we were trying to get just shots of joy, like, people just having fun at the table. And so Wright just kept yelling, Norm, like from Cheers, and everybody would burst into laughter. And he did it again and again and again, and I don't know why it worked, but it did. So when you watch that show now, you'll know that what you can't hear is just Wright yelling, Norm, to get people laughing, to get people going, because people were nervous and uncomfortable. But there was Lim, that big snaggletooth grin. That's what got me smiling. That's what got me laughing. His spirit just sticks with me. He is with me all the time.
The magic of television. As always, we run out of time, John T, and we can talk to you for hours. But let's get back to the book. Because, dare I say it, you would love people to buy the book. So, and this is always a difficult question, because I ask this question a lot. Most of our guests, in fact, all of our guests are from the US, and I say, well, where can we buy the book from? But where can we buy the book from, John T, if we're not in I'm guessing Amazon, or we'll certainly have it.
Yeah, and Bookshop, which is the indie version of Amazon, will ship as well. And my nice publisher is in, I shouldn't even say that, but hopefully it'll show up on your side of the pond before too long. But right now, Amazon, there's also a book on tape version too. And I record it, and it uses music from my friend Mark Iacovone as the interstitial stuff. So that might be a good way to do it, as a book on tape.
I think many people could happily listen to your voice for a good few hours. Thank you. We do appreciate you coming on and speaking to, because I know the book's out 16th of September. Is that correct?
Yeah. It is.
So
it is
16th of September. And I know you can pre-order it in the UK from Amazon. Thanks to John T for his time. Thanks to Alex and Ollie. That's all from us. Thanks for listening, and thanks for supporting us. Stay safe and well, and catch you on.